Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I will be going over my 5-star predictions and if my predictions were correct. So back in July, I selected 5 books off of my shelf that I predicted I would give 5 stars to. And this month in January, I'm assuming this is going out in February, but in January, I finally finished the last of those 5 books, and I can go through and see if I got my predictions right, if I have a good grasp on what books I will enjoy. So hopefully this video won't be too long. I'm just gonna quickly go through the books, what I rated them, and kind of why I rated them that. So the first book on my list was The Witch King by H.E. Edgman. This is actually the last one that I finished. This follows a young trans man who is also a witch. After a disaster happens with his magic, he runs away from the Fae Kingdom, and at the start of this book he has been gone for about 3 years or so, I think. He was to be engaged to the Fae Prince, his best friend, and at the beginning of this book his best friend finally finds him and kind of drags him back to the Fae Kingdom because his throne is being threatened, and he's convinced that if he and Wyatt get married and produce an heir, he will be able to keep the throne. Wyatt is obviously not okay with any of this. He doesn't want to be among the Fae because they discriminate heavily against witches, and also because he is not really ready to have children, being 18 years old. So this book does kind of start out with them being enemies to a degree, because Wyatt feels that his friend is not respecting his wishes and his right to freedom, and is putting him in dangerous situations. I gave this book 4 stars. It had a lot of good things going for it. It had some humor in it that I really enjoyed. It had some very enjoyable side characters. I enjoyed the discussions it had, not just about discrimination against queer people, but also the parallel of discrimination against the witches. I enjoyed watching our main character kind of struggle with becoming this figure of a movement that they weren't in any way prepared to lead, but throughout the book realizing the importance of using their position of power to help those that are struggling. I also enjoyed Wyatt's relationship with his best friend, as well as the development of his relationship with his fiance throughout the story, and as they kind of learned to communicate better and respect each other's wishes more. What kept me from giving this book higher than a 4 is that Wyatt was a character that I struggled with a bit. Sometimes I really loved them, other times I found them very frustrating and just struggled to fully get behind them because of their behavior at times. I also thought at times that the story was a little bit too slowly paced, but I did at the same time enjoy the amount of world building that we got in here. So while it wasn't a 5-star as predicted, I did still really enjoy it and have already purchased book 2 and am looking forward to getting to that. The next book I put on here was the first book of a trilogy, and that is The 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin. I also gave this book 4 stars, so unfortunately not a 5-star read, but it was still a very immersive experience. In the story, we are following a young woman who has been summoned to the overruling capital kingdom that rules over some of the smaller kingdoms because the king. He doesn't really go by king, but they are the ruling family, so I'm just going to call him a king. He is her grandfather. Her mother had abdicated the throne to marry a man from a poor nation, and our main character has grown up in that struggling nation. A lot of the other nations have turned their back on that nation because of her mother's betrayal. So she has been summoned to the capital in order to compete to be one of the king's heirs. She does not want to compete to this. She feels like she is very much underprepared for this situation because she didn't grow up in this court system or anything like that. But obviously she has little choice in what's happening. When she is there, she comes across a group of gods. So these gods are prisoners to the humans. Once upon a time, there were 3 ruling gods, but one of the gods killed the betrayer and forced the other to become a prisoner of the humans. And the humans now worship that god that destroyed his siblings. This god and his children decide to form an alliance with her in hopes that she can help them gain their freedom. In exchange, she wants them to help her win the throne so that she is not used as a sacrifice during one of the rituals that happens during coronation. I really enjoyed the politics of this story. It's something that I enjoy from N.K. Jemisin. Her world building and political systems are very interesting. I also enjoyed the relationship between the humans and the gods. That was really interesting to observe as well. There was a slight romance in here as well that caught my interest. But the reason I couldn't give it 5 stars is I did think that it had some pacing issues. N.K. Jemisin's stories are relatively slow, and that's not always a bad thing, but in this story I did feel like we kind of went on paths that didn't really hold much value to the story. So it just felt like we were spending time with topics of little value. There were definitely things that I would have liked to spend more time with, but at the same time, this is the first book of a trilogy with a pretty complex political and god system and complex history behind everything that's happening. So I can see why she spent so much time maybe on topics that we didn't find as important and will hopefully play a role in maybe some of the future stories. The third book I selected was a fantasy romance called Radiance, and this is by Grace Draven. This could also be considered a slight monster romance. In this story, we are following a young woman called Eldiko. I don't know how to say her name very well, and a young prince called Brishan. Eldiko is a human princess. She is the niece to the king, and Brishan is the second prince to the Kai. However, his brother has produced so many heirs that he has no chance of ever seeing the throne. These are considered 2 unimportant royals. However, with a war on their border, they look to form an alliance through marriage. The 2 of them find each other rather repulsive because they are 2 different species. However, personality-wise, they get along very well and instantly become friends. So throughout the story, we follow them as they leave the human kingdom and travel to his homestead in the Kai kingdom. We see a little bit of the Kai courts as well as his home on the borderlands. We watch as they become closer friends and eventually lovers. I ended up giving this book 5 stars. So yay, my 5-star prediction was correct. This is one of my favorite couples that I have read to date. Their romance was so sweet, so addictive. I just loved watching them slowly fall in love. It was a very comfortable pace for me. I felt like everything was developing at a realistic pace. I really enjoyed their banter, their conversations. There's a lot of humor in this story. I enjoyed his protectiveness of her and also her protectiveness of him. I thought the two of them made an excellent team and had wonderful communication, which is always a wonderful thing to see in a romance. I also really enjoyed the plot in the story. Book 2 definitely has more plot, but this book does a really great job of setting things up and getting you really excited to jump into the next novel. So if you're at all interested in fantasy romances or maybe dipping your toe into a monster romance, I highly suggest this one. It was very sweet. The steamy scenes were excellent as well, and I really enjoyed all the characters or main characters or side characters, and the plot was intriguing as well. All right, the fourth book on this list was The Martian by Andy Weir, and I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. In this book, we are following Mark, and he is believed to be dead by his crew. There was a storm, and they had to evacuate Mars ahead of schedule. Mark ends up surviving and needs to find a way to stay alive until he is able to be rescued. This is a very science-heavy book. We are following Mark while he is repairing his shelter, while he's trying to find ways to gain communication between himself and NASA, while he's trying to produce more food, water, just making sure that he has a way to possibly travel from one location to the other. And we do follow him through his thought process of step by step why he's doing what he's doing and why he's not doing things that he potentially thought he could have done. So, if you aren't into super science-y books, this probably wouldn't be the best option to you, but I found it to be a somewhat relaxing experience. Just watching him plan out everything. It was very much, I feel like if you like HGTV, is that what it's called? Those home renovation TV shows. This kind of gave me the same feeling as those, where you're kind of watching someone as they assess a situation and come up with the best solution to it. This book also had a decent amount of humor in it, which added a sort of levity to a very serious and dangerous situation. Though this is science heavy, I don't want to scare you away too much because I feel like I am. He does describe it in somewhat layman terms. I wouldn't say completely layman terms. However, he is kind of blogging his experience and doing, well, I guess you would say more like a vlog, where he's videoing himself discussing what he did throughout the day, and he's hoping that this will be shared with the general population. So it's not like we have someone who's, trying to communicate with NASA scientists. He is trying to, go through his experience in such a way that everyone on Earth will be able to experience that. So I did really enjoy that. There were some slight pacing issues. Like I said, it is a very slow read, and sometimes it got to be a little bit too much. We did have a couple changes in perspective, but usually it would go to someone in NASA or someone on his crew that's in the spaceship. And it would have been nice if we had like a perspective of someone who was not in any of those you know, sciencey fields, maybe from his parents' point of view or something, just to kind of break up all that science jargon. But overall, I really had a great time with the story, and really look forward to checking out more of his work. All right, and for the last book, I had predicted Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell would be a 5-star, and I did end up giving this 5 stars. In this book, we follow 2 characters, Kaim and Janin. Kaim is the young grandson of the emperor, and Janin is, I always call him like a diplomat. I'm not sure if that's 100% what he is, sort of, but that is around the guidelines of what he is. He had previously been married to Kaim's cousin, but his cousin had been killed in a flybug accident. And in order to keep a relationship going between their 2 planets, Janin is being asked to quickly remarry into the family, in this case to Kaim. So this is a book with forced marriage. In this world, a single empire is ruling over multiple planets, and throughout the universe there are multiple empires. Their planet or their empire is relatively small, and I guess you could say weak compared to others, and they rely heavily on a treaty that prevents other empires from invading them. This treaty is due to be reviewed, and that is why they are so adamant about these 2 being married, because if there's not a strong connection between the planets within the empire, the treaty could be revoked. As our characters start to get to know each other, they start to realize that Kaim's cousin's death may not have been an accident. So this book is a bit of a mystery. We watch the 2 characters as they try to investigate his death and see what caused it and who caused it, and to see if there's someone who is possibly trying to endanger the treaty, which would in turn lead their empire into a very deadly war. There's a lot of things that I really enjoyed about this book. This book has really great mental health representation. One of our characters was previously in an abusive relationship, and we can very much see how that affects his current relationship and the way he tries to act in it. But throughout the story, we also see as he kind of comes out of his shell and becomes his own person and starts to see him as an equal to his partner rather than someone who's just there to serve a purpose. I also really enjoyed the mystery aspect of it. I really enjoyed them interviewing different people and putting the puzzle pieces together. Both of our characters had qualities that really benefited them throughout this investigation. Janin is incredibly intelligent. He's really good at picking up on patterns and reviewing data, while Kaim is more an expert on networking, forming connections, and getting entry into the right locations to speak to the right people. So watching their relationship bloom through this teamwork was a really great experience. I really enjoyed that. I also enjoyed the world building that we got to witness. I thought the setup of this empire was very interesting, and I'm glad that the author is staying within this world and exploring it even more, because the outside empires definitely intrigued me. Overall, this was a rather emotional read because of the mental health issues that one of our characters was having. But this was also one of those stories that you just didn't want to put down because you wanted to see who the villain was and what their motivation was. All right, guys, so those were my 5-star predictions. If I had to put them in order from least favorite to favorite, this is the order that I would put them at, with Radiance being at the top and the 100,000 Kingdoms being at the bottom. Obviously, I rated all of these 4 stars or higher and would highly recommend any of these stories. Let me know down below if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them, and hopefully I will have my next list of 5-star predictions out within this month. Thank you as always for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!